error in 1954 changed Christian eschatology about the rapture maybe forever. It's an error that has affected the end-time beliefs of millions. It's an error that has inspired the publication of hundreds of books and thousands of videos, and even a couple movies. And it is an error that most of its famous proponents refuse to debate or discuss with anyone who disagrees. That's why we have to talk about this today, and we're starting right now. It's a translation error. Now, how can we be so insistent that a translation is an error? I mean, translating from Greek to English is as much an art as science. We debate translations of Hebrew or Koine Greek on this channel every week, and sometimes we get it wrong, sometimes others do as well. But in this case, this error is absolutely wrong. Let's give you an example. If we were discussing the English word up and said it meant down, you'd say we were mistaken. You would bring out a dictionary and show us we were wrong. But what would you do if we still persisted and said we were right? Then you would bring out the Bible and show us that in every usage in the Bible, up never means down. And that is true in every translation. But what if we still persisted? Well, you would probably pull out a bunch of other books and show us how in every single instance the word up always means higher than something or moving to a higher place, that it never means moving to a lower place. And what you're going to learn in today's video is that is exactly what has happened in the debate about this word. In all of the Bible, in all of Greek literature, this word never, ever, ever means what a significant number of Christians say it does. How can that be? This video has been filmed in response to questions by members of this community who asked us to address claims made in videos and books by scholar Dr. Andy Woods about this same topic, and we will discuss it. But the first question we must ask is, why would this error be so popular, and why wouldn't it be immediately refuted? I mean, why wouldn't every Christian scholar simply point out the mistaken notion of the translation and move on? Especially since this error has persisted now almost 70 years. The answer is that this error supports a major, hotly contested doctrine of the end times. Without this error, the major doctrine would probably not be able to stand. So some teachers don't look at this translation closely enough because it supports what they want to believe, and others, well, maybe they intentionally look the other way. How can we say that? Well, if they refuse to debate and discuss the issue publicly with those that disagree, that would be a sign that maybe they're hiding something. Okay, so now you have the basic idea of the scope of this problem and the politics of the problem. It's time to know what the problem is. It's the translation of the Greek word apostasia, which sounds just like the English word apostasy, and guess what? That's what it means. A departure from the faith, a revolt against a belief system, a falling away. And if you look at all the major English translations of the Bible, that is exactly what they say it means. The ESV calls it a rebellion. The NIV calls it a rebellion. The NASB calls it apostasy. And the KJV calls it a falling away. All of those are pretty good translations of the word and give you an idea of what this word means. So what is that other translation, you're probably asking? The mistaken one. I've never seen it in any Bible. Rapture. The other mistaken position says this word apostasia means departure, which those who support this view say is a code word for the rapture. And they have a lot of arguments to support it, as you're going to see in this video. And this debate has raged as far back as 1954. Let's look at the verses in question where this word is found to understand why it is such a hot issue. Now, concerning the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ and our being gathered together to Him, our gathering together to Jesus is the rapture, of course, which is why this is so controversial. We ask you, brothers, not to be quickly shaken in mind or alarmed, either by a spirit or a spoken word, or a letter seeming to be from us, to the effect that the day of the Lord has come. Now, the day of the Lord is the wrath of God that follows the rapture. This sets up the discussion. The Thessalonians had asked Paul a question. They had a concern that they had missed the rapture and that they were living in the wrath of God or the day of the Lord. And Paul was about to comfort them that they didn't miss the rapture and that the day of the Lord has not come. Let no one deceive you in any way. Paul is very concerned that people will deceive intentionally or unintentionally about this issue, the timing of the rapture, and hasn't that been true? We have at least 4 major theories of when the rapture happens. All 4 can't all be right. For that day will not come. That's the day of the rapture, unless the rebellion comes first and the man of lawlessness is revealed, the son of destruction, who opposes and exalts himself against every so-called God or object of worship, so that he takes his seat in the temple of God, proclaiming himself to be God. So Paul is telling us the signs that must take place before the rapture and the day of the Lord can happen. He says that that day, the day of the rapture and the day of the Lord that follows it, will not come unless these 2 signs come first. Now you're beginning to see why this is such a big issue. And it hinges on this one word, apostasia. If that word means departure or rapture, here is what the verse would say. That day will not come unless the rapture comes first, and the man of lawlessness is revealed. And this would be totally consistent with a pre-tribulation rapture position. One of the 4 main theories we talked about, it would say the rapture comes before the revealing of Antichrist. However, the word means rebellion. It doesn't mean rapture. It means apostasy. It means falling away, as we see in all the major Bible translations. And if it means what it really does mean, the verse would read, "For that day will not come unless the rebellion comes first, And the man of lawlessness is revealed, the son of destruction, who opposes and exalts himself against every so-called God or object of worship, so that he takes his seat in the temple of God, proclaiming himself to be God. In this case, the passage would say that the rapture and the day of the Lord that follows it could not take place until after the revealing of the Antichrist, when he sits in the temple of God and proclaims himself to be God. That is a big problem for those holding a pre-tribulation rapture position, obviously because that event, when the Antichrist sits in the temple of God and proclaims himself to be God, happens at the midpoint of the 70th week. If the rapture doesn't happen until the midpoint of the 70th week or later, it cannot be a pre-tribulation event. So the two camps up to this point agree to disagree. One says it means up, one says it means down. Which is it? We already have seen that the Bible translators say apostasia means rebellion. But what about its other uses in the Bible? The word is used 5 times in the Old Testament Greek Septuagint and twice in the New Testament. And in all 7 biblical uses, it means rebellion. What about in Bible dictionaries? Here's what the Bible Lexicon Strong says about the word. Usage, defection, apostasy, result. Okay, that's what we've expected. Again, it says the word means rebellion or apostasy. But what about its use in Greek literature of the time period? Maybe there is an occasional time when it means something else. Well, a pre-tribulational rapture scholar, Dr. Paul Feinberg, decided to find out. He examined all the usages of apostasia in surviving secular Greek literature in the 300 years surrounding the writing of 2 Thessalonians. Here is what he found. If one searches for the use of the noun apostasy in the 355 occurrences over the 300-year period between the 2nd century BC and the 1st century AD, one will not find a single instance where this word refers to a physical departure. Wow, that is very significant because this finding hurts Dr. Feinberg's original position of a pre-tribulation rapture. But obviously, Dr. Feinberg loves the truth more than his position. Good for him. You may not know it, but it was this very point about apostasia that caused me to change my position from that of a pre-tribulation rapture, which I believed back in the 1990s, to my current position of pre-wrath. So, all major Bible translations say the word means rebellion. All references in the Old and New Testament say it means rebellion. The major Bible lexicons say it means rebellion, and in all of Greek literature, in the 300 years surrounding the writing of 2 Thessalonians, it means rebellion. How in the world did anyone think it meant something else? Well, this brings us to 1954 and the big mistake that changed our society's view of the end times. In that year, a scholar, E. Schuyler English, a prolific author of history books and Bible books, wrote Rethinking the Rapture. While researching this book, he noticed that the word apostasia was derived from a Greek word that does mean departure. Dr. English put two and two together and said to himself, at least likely said to himself, if this word is derived from a word meaning departure, then maybe it means departure as well. And this concept is what he wrote in his book. And since the rapture is a departure of sorts, he figured that maybe it was a code word for rapture. This idea was then picked up by Dr. John Walrood, past president of Dallas Theological Seminary, who ran with this idea in his 1957 book, The Rapture Question. After that, the Dallas Theological Seminary, probably one of the most prominent seminaries in the world, began to favor pre-tribulation rapture, as did much of the Southern Baptist Convention, etc. All because of a translation of one word. However, there are two problems with this. First, apostasia doesn't mean departure, as we've just seen. It means departure from the faith, or a departure from a position on something, not a physical departure. And rebellion or apostasy is what it means in all of Greek literature, in all the Bible, in all the Bible dictionaries. Second, in context, it would make the passage in 2 Thessalonians into nonsense. If we insert rapture for apostasia in the verse, it would say something like this. In regard to the rapture, that day cannot happen unless the rapture takes place first. Obviously, that is the ultimate in circular reasoning. But because this translation issue back in 1954 was picked up by a major theologian, the pre-tribulation rapture theory has become the preeminent theory in the USA despite being based on a mistranslation. And the mistranslation went unchallenged for decades. However, in recent years, with the work of Dr. Alan Kirshner and books like our channel's Dawn of a New Day, the correct interpretation began to challenge the 1954 mistake of Schuyler English. Many have re-examined their thinking about 2 Thessalonians and left the pre-tribulation rapture position for the pre-wrath position, just like I did. Other scholars have doubled down on the mistranslation of apostasia, and here is where Dr. Andy Woods enters the story. In Woods' 2018 booklet, The Falling Away, Spiritual Departure or Physical Rapture, he gives 10 reasons why this should be read as a physical departure. And by that, of course, he means the rapture. However, even in Dr. Wood's own words, he says of these 10 reasons, quote, I don't think any of these arguments seals the deal, end of quote. So he agrees his case is a weak one. Let's look at his most prominent points. First, he shows that in 2 Thessalonians, the word apostasy is preceded by the definitive article, the. It is the apostasy, the one or most prominent apostasy. That this apostasy is so great that it will be recognized as a sign before the return of Jesus. Woods doesn't think this is possible to be just a defection from the faith, because there have been defections from the faith throughout history. What would make this one special, he reasons? Well, During the Great Tribulation, many will fall away and betray their brothers and sisters according to Jesus. Would 50%, 60%, or 70% of churchgoers walking away from the faith qualify as the apostasy? You bet it would. And that is what this channel expects to happen. Jesus said the love of most will grow cold. Second, Wood mentions the verb aphistemi, which can mean physical departure, and since apostasy is derived from this earlier word, he wrongly suggests, just like E. Schuyler English, that apostasia can mean physical departure as well. This is officially known in linguistic circles as the, quote, cognate root fallacy, end of quote. The root verb and the nouns derived from it don't have to have the same meanings and almost always don't. In the case of aphistemi, there are several of these derived nouns. Apostasion is a noun derived from this verb, which only means divorce or some other legal act of separation. Apostatare, another derived noun, means one who has the power to dissolve an assembly or to decide a question. In neither case do these nouns carry the same meaning as the verb. Wood also claims the word apostasia can in some rare instances mean physical departure, and he quotes a classical Greek lexicon, not a Koine Greek, but a classical Greek lexicon, Liddell and Scott, to prove it. And guess what? There is a single usage 600 years after the resurrection of Jesus that uses apostasia as a physical departure. 600 years is a pretty long time. Words can change meanings in 600 years. For instance, in English, the word awful used to mean filled with awe. Cute used to mean quick-witted, and meat used to mean all forms of solid food. None of these words mean those things anymore. So again, we need to return to Dr. Feinberg's study, which brings us to Wood's final point of any significance. He points out that the earliest English Bible translations and even the Latin Vulgate say apostasia means departure. First of all, these were all based on a latter usage of the word. What matters most is what it meant back in Paul's day, what Paul thought it meant. And Dr. Feinberg has shown it never meant physical departure back at that time. There is also a bit of disingenuousness about Woods' discussing this. For instance, when Jerome translated apostasia into Latin, he used the Latin word decessio, which can mean physical departure or it can mean apostasy. It can mean either. This is what Woods latches onto. But what he doesn't tell you is that Jerome wrote about this very subject and explained what he meant when he translated this word apostasia. Quote, for he, and he meant Paul, says that unless the falling away, decessio, which is called apostasia, comes first, so that all the nations who are subject to the Roman authority withdraw from them, and he will be revealed, that is, manifested, whom all the words of the prophets announced beforehand, the man of sin. Although Jerome might not have had the same end-time views that we do today, it's clear he thought it was an apostasy, a rebellion, although mistakenly one from Rome and not from God, that was going to lead to the Antichrist. So he did not mean physical departure. He said it himself. Woods also doesn't quote the original Wycliffe English translation properly. Here is what Wycliffe originally translated the verse 2 Thessalonians 2:3 as in his 1382 Bible, the first English translation. Quote, "That no man deceive you in any manner. For but dissension comes first, for no, but departing away, or dissension shall come first, and the man of sin be showed, the son of perdition." End of quote. Again, just as with Jerome, Wycliffe explained what he meant by apostasy in a single note in the text itself, and it was a rebellion, what he called a dissension, not a physical departure. Finally, Woods appeals to the context and his opinion of the restrainer. Woods believes that this is the Holy Spirit, who he says is taken out of the way in a pre-trib rapture. Woods misses the main point, however, which is whether or not the restrainer is Michael, the archangel, as I believe, or the Holy Spirit, as he believes. What matters isn't who, but when the restraint is lifted. The man of lawlessness is revealed, the son of destruction, who opposes and exalts himself against every so-called God or object of worship, so that he takes his seat in the temple of God, proclaiming himself to be God. That revealing of the Antichrist is at the midpoint of the 70th week, when the Antichrist sits in the holy place of God, not at the beginning of the 70th week. And speaking of context, just look at how many times 2 Thessalonians 2 speaks of the apostasy and deception taking place at that time. Verse 2, not to be quickly shaken in mind or alarmed. Verse 3, let no one deceive you in any way. Verse 10, they refuse to love the truth. Verse 11, therefore God sends them a strong delusion, so that they may believe what is false. And also, it speaks of our point, which is that we are to stand firm in the faith instead of being deceived, through sanctification by the Spirit and belief in the truth. Verse 13, verse 15, stand firm and hold to the traditions you were taught by us, either by our spoken word or by our letter. Which brings us to our final point. So what? Does it really matter that Woods and his colleagues are mistaken on this one point? You might not think so, but look at what Paul writes about in this very chapter. The coming of the lawless one is by the activity of Satan, with all power and false signs and wonders, and with all wicked deception for those who are perishing, because they refuse to love the truth and so be saved. Therefore, God sends them a strong delusion so that they may believe what is false, in order that all may be condemned who did not believe the truth but had pleasure in unrighteousness. Those who refuse to love the truth are those that fall away. This point may seem unimportant, but refusing to love the truth that the Bible clearly presents in the word apostasia, just to support a Bible doctrine, the pre-tribulation rapture, despite mountains of proof against this mistake, appears to be a refusal to love the truth. Now, we are not saying that Dr. Woods or Dr. Thomas Ice or any other teacher will fall away in the Great Tribulation. We certainly don't think so, and we certainly pray not. But there is a risk when any person believes a theory or doctrine when the Bible directly refutes it. When love of a theory exceeds love of the truth, it is dangerous. And in this case, the truth that was ignored is that Christians will face the Great Tribulation and the Antichrist before the rapture. Click right here to keep watching and learn why this idea that there aren't any signs or events before the rapture is a great danger to the church. Till then, this is Nelson, and I'll see you there.